Welcome back to the Chat X podcast. I do appreciate you guys coming back and joining us again. Before we start, I do have a message. Someone who's subscribed to me and has their notifications turned on told me that after I made some changes to the podcast layout, they no longer were receiving notifications for when a video of ours went live. So they advised me to tell all of our listeners here, if you are subscribed and you do have notifications turned on for this channel, I would recommend turning them off and then back on again just to make sure you will receive a notification when a new video goes live so you can listen in as easily as possible and as quickly as possible. Once again, I'm joined by my co-host. Introduce yourself, please.
Hey guys, it's Ferris.
Got it. We got Ferris here, and we have two really interesting stories to discuss today that correlate to the main theme of our podcast. The first is a copycat killer for Luigi Mangione, the topic of our previous podcast. This copycat killer was in Grand Rapids, Michigan. The CEO, well, calling him a killer is not exactly accurate. It's unknown whether the CEO that he attacked is going to survive. As of right now, he is in critical condition. And the person who committed the attack is only being charged with assault with a deadly weapon and intent to murder. So, not quite a copycat killer, but a copycat criminal nonetheless. This was an employee of the firm that the CEO who was attacked worked at. A 32-year-old man in Grand Rapids, Michigan is the current suspect. It's not confirmed that he's guilty, and it won't be until he has a trial. But he is the number one suspect. And the other employees said that he was quiet and they don't know what his motive would have been for the attack. Police believe it may be related to the assassination of the CEO allegedly conducted by Luigi Mangione. So we're already starting to see, if not copycat killers, copycat attempted killers. Your thoughts on this,
hmm
Ferris?
I think it's pretty interesting. I'll be honest with you. I think that's just a start. I think that seeing that somebody already this quickly started getting the inspiration from Luigi Mangione's uh, assassination of CEO in New York, going to Grand Rapids, Michigan. I think there's going to be more in the future. And maybe this time it's shifting a pattern. It's shifting a pattern towards people that they know directly that they can get to, that CEOs. And this one is an interesting one after, doing some research on it, finding out the guy is basically a boomer. So
Yes, he
kind of
was.
like,
The CEO who was attacked was born in the mid 1960s. The assailant is 32 years old, so he was born at some point probably in the 1980s to 1990s. 1990s, actually. People born in the 1980s are 40. Time keeps flying by. I forgot
mhm.
about that.
Oh yeah, time does fly by. It does fly by quick, man. I'll tell you that. But I just think that there's going to be some sort of like spread regarding to it. That there's going to be so much more people that are inspired with the event that they're going to start doing it. They're going to start coming after some specific CEOs, mainly like CEOs that they can get closest to. Maybe in their workspace or
Or just people.
someone they know that's in the city,
Yeah,
someone they know that they're kind of easy accessible. So,
that's the thing. CEOs are human beings too. They do have to go to the grocery store, shop, take their kids to school. They have to do all the regular things people in America have to do.
hmm
There's also been a trend on the internet, especially on TikTok, but also on Twitter, Instagram, and other social media sites, where when a user has some frustration with their experience with a brand or with a company, they will reach out to other users. They'll make a post. They'll go comment on some other post. They'll go around and looking for information. They'll say, "Who's the CEO of this company? Give us his name. See if we can find his address. See if we can find his workplace." There's just a big thing going around where anonymous accounts will go around posting, "Hey, I had a terrible experience with Starbucks. Who's Starbucks CEO? Hey, I had a terrible experience with PayPal. Who knows PayPal CEO's name?" And they'll just do all this research, or they'll outsource the resource. Outsource the research to other users of that site. And we're seeing a big uptick in, not quite doxing, I wouldn't call it, since most of this information is publicly available, as these CEOs are, in some sense, public figures as brand ambassadors and representatives of the companies that they are employed by. But it's just a lot of people just going around saying, "Hey, where's this CEO? Who is he? Where does he live? What does he do?" Anytime they have a difficult experience, which I think, if I have to just be completely objective and have put a silver lining on the whole thing outside of people possibly being victims of violence, I think it's really interesting that it's happening this way where people are saying who's the CEO instead of directly attacking maybe the cashier or the customer service representative that they were previously dealing with. Usually those people are the front lines for attacks,
Yeah.
for anger. It's usually misdirected and put to them. And it's interesting that now the higher ups may have to deal with some of that.
Yeah. Uh, Kind of interesting to see, but there's one news story I saw recently how like people are using like targeting people that got doxxed and whatnot. Uh, a news story I saw, I think it was yesterday, before yesterday, regarding to Nick Fuentes, his house getting kind of like some guy came into his house and they had a bow and arrow and a gun, I think, trying to kill him, and they weren't able to, but and because he was inside streaming, but they weren't able to get him. So, and I heard that last time I heard that the attempted assassin got killed. I don't know if it's by the cops or whatnot, but I heard about that. So I'm seeing that a lot of people are kind of like aiming at people. So it was kind of interesting to see. I won't lie.
Yeah, things are escalating. People are becoming more willing to engage in violence. I also saw that news
Yeah.
story, and I'm pretty sure the man killed a pair of dogs. I'm not sure if they were belonging to Nick Fuentes himself or to the neighbors, but a pair of dogs were killed by this assailant, even though no humans were harmed, other than the attempted assailant himself.
Yeah,
In
that's
rem-
interesting.
So, for those of our listeners who don't know, Nick Fuentes is an extreme right wing figure. He's sort of a political commentator, streamer, does things like that. But he considers himself to be a member of the alt right or far right within American politics, and that leads nicely into our next story, which is about someone who was influenced by strains of both far right and far left politics. The school shooter in Wisconsin, who was recently apprehended, or apprehended is not the right word. They killed themselves at the scene after killing two other individuals, injuring six more, and their body was recovered by the police. This happened at the Abundant Life Christian School in the capital of Wisconsin. The killer was Natalie Rupnow, a 15-year-old student at that private school. She killed a teacher, another student, and injured six students. She said her ideology was related to radical feminism. An online movement, once again, borrows from far left, which is where feminism usually comes from, and far right ideologies. She leaked her manifesto online and contained within her manifesto were, well, obviously, I mean, there were misandrous comments, things about being anti-men, which is sort of the main basis of the entire radical feminist movement. Is this idea of women being superior to men. It's hard to explain it without correlating it to some other movements like white supremacy or deep patriarchal values. This idea that there is a sort of a caste system set up within the world and that one group should be at the top of it. Her belief was that women, in particular white women, because her brand of radical feminism was centered exclusively on white women. She expressed disparaging remarks from men of all races, but especially for black men. She viewed black men in particular as the lowest rung of society and one that should be completely expunged and removed from society. Really, just a lot of interesting stuff in there. I encourage you all to go look at it if that's something that you're interested in. What are your thoughts on this? Your first takeaways immediately as soon as you hear this, Ferris.
Hmm. I find it kind of fascinating. I'll tell you that two things mainly I got from that: the fact that she's a radical left feminist and she's a racist, like a white nationalist. Interesting to see, because usually when it's coming like far left, they're not really that. I guess their base isn't technically aimed at being racists, but she is something else. I'll tell you that. Her taking the kill all men straight to heart, I guess you can say. Pretty interesting. I'll tell you that.
Absolutely.
So, but
One
going that far as in her manifesto and listing what she has said, kind of wild. I'll tell you that. So. I don't know what can we really say about this specifically. Like, how can we make sure we prevent something like that ever happening again? You know. So
Well, one thing that was particularly interesting to me about it all was that in the manifesto, she listed particular accounts on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok that she followed who she viewed as influential to her behavior. I went personally to go look at for some of these accounts, for some of these individuals that she was quoting and referring to and saying, I'm directly inspired by this person. I love this person's ideas. I believe in what this person was saying. Most of the accounts that she referenced are aware that they were referenced and they immediately deactivated their accounts and deleted their entire post history. They do not want to be associated with this level of political violence. They view this as dangerous. They don't want to be associated with people they view as insane, from is what I'm seeing posted by other people who are tangentially related to these named figures that were referenced by the shooter. Miss Rupnow, I believe is the name again. I believe is the pronunciation. Not sure, but we'll stick with Rupnow. Miss Rupnow, she really seems to be. I mean, clearly she affected at least three people's lives in the worst way possible. She ended three of them, two others in her own, as well as injuring six individuals. But now, her actions are having consequences that reach far beyond just the city and the area of Wisconsin that she lived in. They're reaching into the online sphere, affecting people who live all throughout the country and in some cases out of the country. Some of these individuals she referenced aren't American citizens. They're people that live in other countries, but whose ideology is spreading through the internet and causing things to happen in the heart of America in Wisconsin. And it's an interesting thought experiment to say that we're in an era now where we're hyper connected. People are able to communicate with each other all around the world. And that's been used for extreme good. It's been used to help a lot of things out. But we're really, really, in the past decade especially, starting to see how that can be used negatively. And now, I mean, we're starting to see it in examples of domestic terrorism that are beyond, I think, a lot of people's wildest imagination of how much it could be impacted by social media. What the most, if you thought of the most deranged possible outcomes for the negative and perverse, consequences of mass social media adoption by the world, this is pretty much right where you would end up. And with mass shooters and other terrorists being radicalized online by different thinkers and carrying out acts of extreme violence that destroy several lives. Any thoughts on that, Ferris?
You think you nailed it right on the point. It's especially with specifically like online posts and accounts that target like I'm trying to figure out the word again.
Like
You
the
said it just
like
perfectly, kind of like making them like radicalizing him more. So to an extent, you got to be careful. I don't fully believe in full on free speech to an extent. What I mean by that's like there's some things shouldn't be able to be out there, because some things out there can basically it's propaganda and it can be able to influence an individual to be able to do harmful stuff. So I
interesting that
think
you
those individuals, because those individuals can cause a lot of harm to society. So
interesting that you say that you don't fully believe in free speech. My question really then to that would be, who has the obligation, who has the duty to regulate free speech? Is it going to be the platforms, the social media platforms? Are they obligated to disenfranchise people that are causing vulnerable individuals to feel motivated, to feel these intense, to feel this intense drive to go out and cause harm? Is the responsibility of the government? I mean, in the United States, which is where this shooting occurred, free speech is a
yeah,
constitutionally protected right, and the internet, as
yeah,
something that originated in the U.S. In the United States, has sort of had that as a moral or an ethical quality ingrained in it since the very beginning. The internet is probably the most the bastion of free speech globally and throughout the entire world. There are a lot of
yeah,
other countries where free speech is not considered a legally protected right that's ingrained in the fabric of their society that can't be removed. So they place restrictions on that. Germany is one of the most notable. You can be just straight up arrested and put in jail for a number of years for things you post online in Germany. Here in the United
hmm
States, a lot harder to do that. You will obviously see some of those, tweets that go viral, some videos on TikTok that go viral where
yeah,
they'll print out something somebody said on the internet, like, "Oh, I want to attack this politician," and they'll print it out. The FBI will show up at your door, but people usually don't get arrested over those comments. They might get investigated, placed on a watch list, warned, made to take it down, fined, But jail time for online comments is usually somewhat rare. The only notable example, even actually, that's incorrect. I was going to say Alex Jones, but Alex Jones wasn't arrested. He was sued, and he was made to pay up a lot of money, and he had a lot of his assets and his businesses stripped from him and forced to be sold. But
Yeah,
he's still out there. He didn't serve any time in jail for it. So your speech on the internet can damage you in real life. Alex Jones is a living testament to that. Nick Fuentes, living
yes,
testament to that. But legally, the internet is one of the freest places on earth, and
I agree.
it really remains to be seen who. What is your answer to the question? Who do you think has the obligation? Is it the platforms or the government, or is it neither of theirs? I honestly, I'm almost very libertarian with it. I don't know if it would be right to restrict the speech, and if so, determining who's allowed to make those restrictions, who's allowed to crack down and decide when speech is dangerous. I mean, we're currently talking about the Luigi Mangione case of the assassination of the CEO, and my belief is the only thing he did wrong was killing a CEO who's too young, and I think
Yeah.
I think the guy who attempted to kill the CEO in Grand Rapids, his biggest mistake, once again, I think the guy he targeted was a little too young. He was boomer-esque. He was in the boomer age range. He may have been a boomer, depending on, if his LinkedIn profile is accurate or if he's
Hmm.
adding or subtracting a few years. But if he was attacking a Gen Xer, I don't support that. I think that's unacceptable levels of violence. But I think if he was attacking a baby boomer, he was somewhat justified. As they've done more than attack the younger generations. But is my speech inflammatory? Am I motivating people to go out there and cause harm because I say, hey, those guys, I don't think they did anything that wrong. Those people were close enough to
Hmm.
death already. If you take an old person out, I don't think you should have to do as much time as if you kill a young person. Let's just take how many years they had left until the average life expectancy, which is about, for a man, 77, 78 in America. I think it actually went down to 76
Yeah.
during COVID. So if you kill somebody who's a CEO who's 70, do a quick six, do 6 years in prison. Don't give them a life in prison. If you kill somebody in their
Yeah.
20s, you should probably do 50 years or so. But
Yeah.
my speech like that, should that be, taken down? Is that too far in terms of free speech? What do you think, Ferris?
I think that's a very good question the way you worded it. And to answer for those two things, definitely not the government. The government cannot be the one to be able to manage free speech because the government specifically can shift between right wing leaning, left wing leaning, and who knows they can get to an extent where like they can control free speech. They can control like they can do too much with control. They'll just be an authoritarian to an extent, specifically with your speech. Um, but also for me, it's more so to an extent social media. But I'm not talking about like when I mean like free, like not everybody should have free speech. I'm talking about the fact like there's always to an extent. I don't think people that are far, 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 far right wing leanings that are like KKK, white national, should be able to be having platforms that much because that right there can lead to more issues. If you do something like that, I guess you can do it more so like the only platform you can kind of do when it comes to something like that is if you have a full on okay, a right wing KKK member, a centrist and a left wing individual all on one platform debating. So it can be like an open stage so people can kind of like see and kind of listen to all sides of the story. You know, that probably make more sense. But like having straight up like propaganda, right wing propaganda or far left wing propaganda might not be the best thing at times. That's the only thing I can think of. But it's hard to say who can regulate it because social media companies aren't that good when it comes to regulating. But for example, when it's like Instagram or Facebook, if people talk about Palestine, they get taken down, their post gets taken down, accounts gets restricted. That right
Absolutely.
there is coming after people's free speeches. But like the issue, for example, you can look at X. X likes to or
Yeah, formerly known
X,
as
which
Twitter.
is used to be formerly known as Twitter. Elon Musk himself likes to say, "Oh, it's free speech. They have free speech and all that." But if you, well, especially with community notes, but if you specifically see it clearly, it's not full on free speech. He lets the right wing KKK clansmen say whatever they want. Lets them get away with whatever they want. But if you say anything specifically more left leaning, or if you say anything for Palestine or anything like that, to an extent you can get like, oh, you probably violated something, Twitter rules or X rules. That's technically not free speech in my opinion. So for me, it's like it's kind of hard to see who kind of regulates it, because human beings are flawed, and if somebody gets a power to regulate something like that, like free speech, it can lead to authoritarianism to an extent, you know. So my answer is kind of hard to do that. It's just for me, specific groups shouldn't be able to have access to people spew all bullcrap, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, I would be against regulation by the government of free speech in any sort. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously, if you're
Hmm.
inciting violence, or the yelling fire in a movie theater is the go to example most people use for when your free speech is causing harm and cannot be protected. I believe in reasonable interpretations like that. And I actually I think the U.S. government, that's probably one of the things they've done best is they've gotten really good. They've done a really good job of maintaining people's personal liberty in that. Free speech in this country is probably one of the freest in the world. I think your
Hmm.
ability to say things, criticize the government, criticize other people, criticize just to freely speak your mind in America, probably one of the best in the world at that. But it does remain to be seen that, I mean, there's a lot of people out there saying a lot of stuff. Some of it's probably going to cause violence. We're going to see the effects of that. We're seeing it now, and we're probably going to see more in the future. So we're going to have an answer for this. We're about to wrap it up now, guys, but go ahead and give me your answer to that in the comments if you'd like to. What do you think about the free speech issue? Should people have complete free speech, even if it causes harm, even if it seems to be inciting violence? Whose job is it to place restrictions on that? Is anybody obligated to? Is there a duty with any group, individuals, institutions? Or is it just something that we have to try to regulate as a society? Some type of ethic or moral grounding that we have to establish as a culture that cannot have a legal or otherwise rules based precedent set for restricting free speech. If you do that, go ahead and like. If you don't do that, also please still like and do subscribe if you're not subscribed already. I hope you enjoyed this. Let's log off now. Say goodbye to people, Ferris.
You guys have a good day, good night, and see you next week.